So what makes something an animal? We'll talk about that in this video. The final traditional kingdom of domain Eukarya is kingdom Animalia. The diversity of this group is astounding, with millions of identified species. When we look at the supergroups, we see animals down here in the Epistoconta with the fungi. We saw how domain Eukarya was broken down into supergroups and smaller kingdoms, and these kingdoms can be broken down into smaller groups called phyla. We will discuss some of the more common animal phyla and what differentiates these groups of animals from each other. So while we won't be discussing all of these animal phyla, we will be talking about the sponges and cnidarians, talking about the protostomes and the deuterostomes, and some of the different organisms that fall into those groups. So starting with sponges, phylum Porifera. This is the most ancient animal lineage. Sponges are made up of a loose collection of cells, and they lack true tissue structure. A tissue is a group of cells of a similar type organized in a specific way to perform a function. And sponges, they don't have that. They're just this loose assemblage of cells. All other animals, on the other hand, have true tissues, like our next group, phylum Cnidaria. These include jellyfish, anemones, and corals. These are simple animals that do have true tissues and radial symmetry. They have nervous tissue, muscle-like tissue, and digestive tissue, and include things, again, like jellyfish, anemones, and corals. Our next group is phylum Arthropoda. Arthro refers to joints, and poda refers to appendages, and so these are organisms named for their jointed appendages. These include crustaceans, arachnids, and insects. The general characteristics of arthropods are that they are segmented animals with specialized segments and appendages. The body of an arthropod is completely covered by an exoskeleton. A lobster is a great example of a standard arthropod. Hard outer shell, jointed legs and appendages, segmented body. There are 5 main subphyla of arthropods, one of which, Trilobitomorpha, is extinct. The remaining 4 subphyla include the Chelicerata, which are named after their mouthparts. These include the arachnids such as spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites. The Crustacea, such as crabs, lobsters, crayfish, shrimps, and barnacles. The Myriapoda, which include millipedes and centipedes. And lastly, the Hexapoda, which include insects. This is the most diverse group, with insects having the greatest number of recognized species of all animals. The Hexapoda are named for having 6 legs. Hexa meaning 6, and pod referring to legs or appendages. And so this head, thorax, and abdomen basic body plan with 6 legs, that is standard for insects. Our next phylum is phylum Mollusca. The mollusks are represented by soft-bodied animals, most of which are protected by a hard shell. These can include snails, slugs, clams, octopuses, and squids, to name a few. There are several major groups of mollusks, and the three most important are the gastropods, gastro meaning stomach and pod meaning foot. These guys, they're literally named stomach foot because their main body cavity is within their main appendage that's in contact with their environment. So things like snails and slugs, they are gastropods. The next group are the bivalves. Bi referring to two, and valves meaning shells. So these are going to be the two-shelled organisms, things like clams and oysters and scallops and mussels. And then the last group of mollusks that I would like to talk about are the cephalopods. Cephalo refers to head, and pod refers to feet or appendages. And so these are the head feet. Their appendages are connected directly to their head. Things like an octopus or squid, cuttlefish, and nautilus. Our next animal phylum is phylum Annelida. These include worms with body segmentation. It turns out that there are three main groups of annelids. We have our polychaetes, which are bristly marine worms found in the oceans. We have our earthworms, or oligochaetes, which eat their way through soil. They have a few bristles, but not as many as the polychaetes. And then lastly, we have the leeches. Most of which are free-living carnivores that live in a variety of habitats. You'll see in this image, this leech is identified as a medicinal leech. And you may think that, okay, well, we don't really use leeches in medicine anymore, right? And it's true, in the past, leeches were used to drain someone's blood if they had a fever, thinking that that individual had too much blood. It turns out that's not the cause of the fever and not a good treatment for a fever. But there are still medicinal uses for leeches. If an individual comes to a hospital or medical facility and they've severed an appendage, maybe they've accidentally cut off a finger or a thumb or an ear or something like that, turns out reattachment surgeries are more successful if blood is actively flowing through that severed appendage once it's been reattached. So once the appendage is reattached, a leech will often be connected to the end of that appendage to promote blood flowing through that severed appendage, allowing the reconnection surgery to be more successful. Second to last group, echinoderms, phylum Echinodermata. These are organisms that have a spiny surface. They are exclusively marine, meaning they're only going to live in the oceans. These are going to be things like sea stars and sand dollars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. Now the final phylum I want to discuss, we're going to go into more detail because it includes the organisms we're more familiar with. So phylum Chordata includes all of the animals which have a skull and a backbone. We collectively call these animals vertebrates. So vertebrates are all animals with a skull and a backbone. They are represented by mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes. Now the diversity within the vertebrate group is large, But they make up only 3% of the different types of animal species which have been identified, meaning 97% of the different species of animals are invertebrates. Yet usually 9 times out of 10, if you ask someone to name an animal, they're going to say a cat or a dog or a dolphin or a lion or an elephant. And all of these organisms, they are vertebrates. So the first group of vertebrates we'll talk about are the fish. They are aquatic, meaning that they live in water, freshwater or saltwater. And there are 3 major categories of fish. We have the jawless fish, which are the agnathans, things like lampreys and hagfish, where they don't have a bottom jaw. We have cartilaginous fish, the chondrichthyans. These are going to be things like sharks and rays and skates. And then most of the other fish are bony fish, or osteichthyans, where they have bones hardened with calcium salts. Our next group of vertebrates are the amphibians. Now, amphibians are often able to live on both land and in water, but sometimes at different stages of life. Adults often live on land, but still require standing water to reproduce because the tadpole stages are aquatic. And their name, amphibians, it actually comes from amphibios. Amphi meaning both or double, and bios meaning life. So they have 2 lives, or 2 areas they can live, both on land and in water. The next group of vertebrates are the reptiles. These include things like snakes and turtles and lizards, and also include birds and dinosaurs. These are more adapted to land than amphibians. They have waterproof, scaly skin, amniotic eggs, and most are ectotherms, or cold-blooded. However, the birds are endotherms, or warm-blooded. Birds also have a few other traits that make them a different group of reptiles. And our last group that we're going to talk about are mammals. We are warm-blooded, so endotherms. And some of the defining characteristics of mammals is that we produce milk from mammary glands for our young, and we have hair. It turns out that there are 3 different types of mammals organized based on their pregnancy. So we have the monotremes, which are egg-laying mammals, things like the duck-billed platypus. We have marsupials, which are pouched mammals, and at birth their young are born in a very embryonic state, but the young then travel into their pouch and continue development in their mother's pouch. And then there are eutherians, or the placental mammals, where most of embryonic development occurs within the mother's reproductive system. So these groups are based on pregnancy. And that completes our discussion on the diversity of life. Now, I know there was a lot of information here, most of it probably unfamiliar and new and confusing. The goal of these lectures are not that you'll have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of the diversity of life after this lecture, but instead more to give you an appreciation for how similar, yet how different, life is. This completes our discussion of the diversity of life. In our next module, we'll talk about how chemistry impacts our daily lives.